Hi everybody, this is Father Tim again. I'm in quarantine, so the 5:30 Mass is going on. Monsignor Greg Susselman is doing it. Tomorrow we'll have Father Dick Gillen doing the 8:30 Mass at Foreman and 10:30 Mass in Oaks. My test came back today this morning and it was negative as far as being positive. It was negative for the coronavirus, so that's good news. But they say that you should be careful still because sometimes maybe it didn't manifest its stuff by day 5. It's enough to be positive by day 5, and they really want the test taken between days 7 and 10 after you've been exposed. So just as a precaution, the bishop is asking me to follow, or thinking it's prudent for me to follow the guidelines that the health officials gave me. But I feel great, and my I keep track of my temperature, and it's always lower than normal. I want to give you my homily for this weekend. I can't help that go by. Since I'm really not on vacation, I might as well work. And I will have Mass tomorrow on the web at 8:30 while the Foreman Mass is going on. It'll be a private Mass. But since I didn't arrange anybody to record it over there, we'll just do it. I'll do it myself over here. And I'm giving you my homily tonight, so you can just, if you want, do the prayers and stuff, and you're not coming. If you can't come to Mass for some reason or decided not to, maybe you can do the readings and the prayers of the Mass, and then listen to this homily if you would like. I'm going to read the Gospel first, okay? Just quiet ourselves and focus. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. After he had fed the people, Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain to pray by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. He went to pray. Up the mountain, he went to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Remember last week's Gospel? Now we're in chapter 14 of Matthew. And that Gospel began with, when Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. Well, we remember the story if you're there. All the people heard about it. They hurried on foot. They wanted more of Jesus. And he had pity on them. And he healed their sick. He saw what they needed, how much they were suffering. And then further, it went where they were hungry, the crowds were big, and the disciples said, dismiss the crowds, for this is a deserted place, so they can find themselves something to eat. And Jesus said, well, you give them something to eat. That caught me. Well, the disciples said, we don't have anything. Well, what do you have? 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, bring them to me. And we hear the story how they brought them to Jesus, and he fed with those. He had them then distribute them after he blessed them. He took, gave, and broke and gave it to the disciples. Remember, it's reminiscent of Eucharist and miracles that can flow from the Eucharistic table, but also the miracles that can flow from us when we bring our gifts, what we have, to the Lord, when we think about the hungry of the world, whether that's in Haiti or Peru. So that miracle happens. Now, this week, he dismisses the crowd and made his disciples get into the boat. Notice that language. It probably wasn't easy to get the disciples to precede him to the other side. He made them get in there, in the boat. Jesus was persistent. He needed his alone time with the Father. He needed to regain focus. He had heard of John the Baptist's death. And remember, I spoke about how they knew each other from the womb when Mary and Elizabeth came together, and how Jesus said there's no man born of woman greater than John the Baptist. And John said of Jesus, I'm not worthy to untie his sandal straps. And now this great man, John the Baptist, had died. Maybe he had to reflect on not only his death and grieve the reality of this world, but his own death. I mean, he wept at the death of Lazarus. He probably had some tears at the death of John the Baptist. I wouldn't doubt it. He had to reflect too on his mission. He wasn't going to do this alone. He had to get his disciples involved. And later on, when Peter finally confesses that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, that's when he says, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. This is Matthew's gospel. And so his disciples he had established his kingdom on the earth, his church, his kingdom of love. And maybe help people realize who he was, who God is. He was like the prophets of old. In the first reading, Elijah is going through the desert. He comes to this cave. But remember, he was fleeing from Jezebel after he had killed the 400 prophets of Baal. And Elijah finds his focus in this story too. First, there's the storm, the fire, heavy wind, and all that. But he finds God in a tiny whispering sound. So Elijah, the prophet, for the Jewish people, he was the greatest of prophets. He went up in a flaming chariot. And then in Matthew 17, remember we're in 14 now, in chapter 17, when Jesus goes up the holy mountain with Peter, James, and John, and to pray, and Elijah and Moses appear to him, and they talk about the passage to come. So we need the same thing that Jesus and Elijah needed as human beings. We need quiet, personal prayer to find our focus, to be able to focus on God again. There will be the storms of this life. But if we find our focus in the quiet, we will be able to endure them. We will not drown. So the story goes on how they're terrified when they see Jesus walking on the water. And they cry out in fear. And he says, get a hold of yourselves. Be not afraid. And Peter says, if it is you, command me to come to you. Come. He followed. Excuse me, I have to put this on pause. Oh, thank you, Rick.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just got the money from the Mass. How about that? The Mass just got done. So here Peter has steps out of the boat, and a miracle is happening, as miraculous as feeding the 5,000. And then he starts focusing on how strong the wind was, and becomes frightened. He begins to sink. But he did a good thing. He went back to Jesus. Lord, save me. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? We need that lone time to deal with our doubts, to refocus on who we're dealing with, the Lord of life. Truly, you are the Son of God. Father, Son, and Spirit dwells within us. Daily, we need to refocus on how great our God is and who the Lord Jesus is. That's why we need to be like Jesus, who went to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. We too need our personal prayer time with God, whether it's in nature or the quiet church at adoration. We need it. God bless you. That's why I love this bell. It helps me focus. Every once in a while I go by and just again, there'll be Mass tomorrow at 8:30 in Foreman, 10:30 in Oaks, and I will have a personal private Mass on the web, Facebook at 8:30. Have a good evening.